Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Inman, and now I'm reading When I Was Young in the Mountains. It's another book by Cynthia Ryland about family, and this family lives in Virginia. And what I want you to do while I'm reading, I want you to think about your family and the things you remember about maybe last summer, and maybe things that you could write about now about your life and how you're living. But I also want you to think about repetition, because this book has a lot of repetition. It'll say, when I was young in the mountains, when I was young in the mountains. And she does that on purpose. I want you to think about what you think the purpose is of this repetition in this story and how it adds to the story, or if you think it doesn't add. I want you to think about that, and we'll talk about that afterward. See you in a few minutes. When I Was Young in the Mountains by Cynthia Ryland. When I was young in the mountains, Grandfather came home in the evening, covered with the black dust of a coal mine. Only his lips were clean, and he used them to kiss the top of my head. When I was young in the mountains, Grandmother spread the table with hot cornbread, pinto beans, and fried okra. Later, in the middle of the night, she walked through the grass with me to the Johnny house and held my hand in the dark. I promised never to eat more than one serving of okra again. When I was young in the mountains, we walked across the cow pasture and through the woods carrying our towels. The swimming hole was dark and muddy, and sometimes we saw snakes, but we jumped in anyway. On our way home, we stopped at Mr. Crawford's for a mound of white butter. Mr. Crawford and Mrs. Crawford looked alike and always smelled of sweet milk. When I was young in the mountains, we pumped pails of water from the well at the bottom of the hill and heated the water to fill round tin tubs for our baths. Afterward, we stood in front of the old black stove, shivering and giggling, while Grandmother heated cocoa on top. When I was young in the mountains, we went to church and the schoolhouse on Sundays, and sometimes walked with the congregation through the cow pasture to the dark swimming hole for baptisms. My cousin Peter was laid back into the water, and his white shirt stuck to him, and my grandmother cried. When I was young in the mountains, we listened to frogs sing at dusk and awoke to cowbells outside our windows. Sometimes a black snake came into the yard, and my grandmother would threaten it with a hoe. If it did not leave, she used the hoe to kill it. 4 of us once draped a very long snake, dead of course, across our necks for our photograph. When I was young in the mountains, we sat on the porch swing in the evenings, and Grandfather sharpened my pencils with his pocket knife. Grandmother sometimes shelled beans and sometimes braided my hair. The dogs lay around us, and the stars sparkled in the sky. A bob white whistled in the forest. Bob, bob, bob white? When I was young in the mountains, I never wanted to go to the ocean. I never wanted to go to the desert. I never wanted to go anywhere in the world, for I was in the mountains, and that was always enough. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that book, When I Was Young in the Mountains by Cynthia Ryland. And I hope you were thinking about the repetition that she says over and over, when I was young in the mountains, when I was young in the mountains. Why do you think she did that? I think she did that. She's really driving home her point about when she was young. This is how she was living. But I think it almost sounds like a poem. And I think really that's why she did it. It helps to set the tone of this is what's happened in the past. And it helps to add to the style of this book. It really makes it more poem-like, I think. And I also love the ending of it. I'm going to read that one more time to you. She says, when I was young in the mountains, I never wanted to go to the ocean. I never wanted to go to the desert. See, she's reflecting on how she was feeling. And when you're writing, that's a good thing to do, is reflect about your whole story. I never wanted to go anywhere else in the world, for I was in the mountains, and that was always enough. You know, that's just a really great conclusion. And so when you are writing, you need to think about that too sometimes, but how can I reflect over everything I've written? And how can I end this with a good, strong paragraph? So, fun book to read about the past. It could be happening now, but this probably happened when she was a little girl. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.